I recently got thinking about real-time strategy, or RTS, mission design, and how sometimes RTS missions can feel very similar despite being in very different games. Every RTS has missions where you need to go destroy the enemy base, for example. However, when I tried to compare missions to each other, I noticed that I wasn't aware of any systematic way of talking about the design of RTS missions. So for fun, I decided to try and create one. Now, I'm aware I'm not any more qualified than the average person to do so. I'm just someone who's played RTS games since childhood, but here's what I came up with. Let me know what you think. First, let's lay out what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to create a framework for describing the core elements of an RTS mission, essentially summarising what is the mission trying to get you to do. This should be applicable to any RTS game, and you should be able to identify missions that feel similar and see how they compare and contrast. As for what it's not, I'm not trying to compare the RTS games themselves or their mechanics, like how base building or unit control vary between games. That's a bit high level. I'm also not trying to be so granular as to include unique level mechanics. I decided to start with taking elements that you'll commonly find in RTS missions and representing them with a letter. And two of the most common elements you'll find are attacking and defending. By attacking, I mean that a major objective of the mission is focused on attacking an objective. Commonly you're trying to destroy the enemy base or destroy something in that base, but sometimes you're attacking to get to a specific spot on the map. All of these I'd classify as attacking. For defending, I mean that you're trying to prevent the enemy from destroying a specific unit or overrunning an area. Now this is different from just regular attacks on your base by the enemy, which most RTS missions will have. It might be a bit boring otherwise. In a defending mission, the enemy will make a concerted effort to destroy their objective, and you'll need to react to it. Let's look at two missions to illustrate this: The Outlaws and 0 Hour from the StarCraft II Wings of Liberty campaign. In Outlaws, you have a base, your enemy has a base, and to win, all you have to do is destroy it. It's an attacking focused mission. Contrast that with 0 Hour, where you have a base that is under attack from a constant wave of enemy units, and you just have to survive for 30 minutes before you win the mission. All you have to do is defend. Let's give these maps an A and a D for attack and defend. Let's look at another example from the same campaign: Smash and Grab. Here you have a base and need to attack into an enemy base and destroy things to capture an artifact, just like in the Outlaws. But there's a difference. Here there's another enemy that also wants that artifact, and you have to race against time in order to get the artifact first. Now this is not an element that's present in the Outlaws, where you can just sit back and make as big an army as you want before levelling the enemy base. And this time pressure does affect how you play the mission. So let's add a T to the descriptor for time pressure. How about another attacking focus mission, the Mobius Factor? Here you have to destroy 3 data cores to finish the mission. 3 objectives is slightly more complex than just one, and it allows for some slightly more interesting design and use of the map. So let's add a 3 in our descriptor to show there are 3 separate objectives that we're attacking. There's also a time pressure, as you have a hard time limit to destroy the data cores, so let's add a T as well. Let's look at another defensive mission now, the Evacuation. Your objective on this map is to escort several convoys to the local starport, where civilians can evacuate. You're defending objectives in this mission, but unlike in 0 Hour, the objectives, the convoys, are not stationary. They move, and that makes their defense more difficult as you have to move your forces to compensate. Let's add an M for mobile to this mission, and we can imagine adding an S for static to 0 Hour's descriptor, because you're just defending your base there. Okay, so I've divided mobile and static defensive missions, but what would that look like for an attacking focus mission? Well, earlier we saw Smash and Grab, where you have to attack through to a static objective, which we now can call A1ST, and we can compare that with the Great Train Robbery, where you need to catch and destroy 8 trains that snake across the map without letting any escape. These are obviously mobile objectives, and we could label this mission A8MT. Okay, that's a good start. We've got a system for describing an attacking or defensive focus mission, and we can include some detail about how many objectives it has, if they're static or moving, and if there's any time pressure. However, we can't yet describe all the missions in Wings of Liberty. There's a few more mission types that don't really fit neatly into the attack or defend boxes. Firstly, let's look at the Devil's Playground. Your goal here is to collect 8,000 minerals, and neither attacking nor defending alone will complete that objective. You need to play differently to conserve your resources, whilst also exploring the map and exploiting new resource nodes. Let's describe this mission with a G for gathering. None of the other elements we've described so far really apply. There's not really any specific map objectives, static or mobile, and there's not really any time pressure that pushes you to complete the map within a certain amount of time. Secondly, let's look at Liberation Day, the first mission. Here you don't actually have any base or workers at all, and thus can't make new forces. You need to instead conserve your forces as you make your way across the map. Since your economy is missing, let's add an N for no economy to the front of this descriptor. You're attacking across the map to one static objective without any time pressure, so the descriptor would be NA1S. There are some missions in Wings of Liberty where you have multiple parts to the mission, or multiple objectives in the mission. For example, take Safe Haven. Here you need to destroy 3 Protoss Nexi, and then destroy the Protoss mothership, and do both within a certain time limit. We can use an arrow to show the 2 linked sections of this mission. But sometimes you have more than one objective at the same time, as in Cutthroat. Here you need to quickly gather 6,000 minerals, but you also really need to attack the enemy's 3 mining bases to stop him gathering 6,000 minerals first. We can describe this with a plus sign, like this. Personally, I like brackets, so I'm going to take anything in common outside the brackets. This mission also has a second part after you've gathered 6,000 minerals, which we can also show. There's also Outbreak, which is a mission that cycles between attacking the enemy and defending your base from a zombie-like horde. Since it cycles back and forwards, we can use a 2-way arrow to denote this. For this mission, you need to destroy every enemy building on the map, which is over 100 of them. For situations like this, where the number of objectives is large, or unknown, or can change, I'll use X to note the number. At this point, we can mostly describe all the missions in Wings of Liberty, at least at a high level. Now, I'm not going to suggest that this perfectly describes all the nuance to every mission, but it does at least allow us to see which missions are somewhat similar and which have some interesting design elements. Let's take 0 Hour, The Dig, and All In, 3 missions which are all D1ST. We can see that they all have quite similar elements to them. All are defensive missions with 2 choke points into your base, but there are also notable mechanics like the drill in The Dig or the artifact in All In that spice up the formula, but we don't need to include those unique mechanics in this framework. We can also see there are some missions that have unique designs. Welcome to the Jungle is one. Here you need to use a worker to collect 7 items from locations spread across the map, while also preventing your opponent from doing the same. You do need to attack when your opponent is capturing an objective, but you also need to defend your own harvesting attempts. So I would call this AD7ST. Okay, so now we have descriptions of each mission from Wings of Liberty. Let's compare this campaign to another game's campaign. For example, how about Fall of the Trident from Age of Mythology? A few broad things we can notice at a glance. Firstly, the number of time-sensitive missions is quite different. More than half of Wings of Liberty's missions are time-sensitive, but less than a quarter for Fall of the Trident. Secondly, there are far more missions in Fall of the Trident that are multi-part, where you're doing something for the first part of the mission and then things change to give you a different experience. There's a few additional mission elements that I want to mention which we didn't see in Wings of Liberty but are found in other campaigns. Firstly, the build mission. where your objective is to build something and often defend it. For example, I Hope This Works, from the Age of Mythology campaign, where you have to build the Trojan horse. Another element is what I'll call a questing type mission. This mission gives you a set of different objectives to achieve, rather than a single goal to aim for. The quintessential example that I have is the mission Crucible from Age of Empires 2. Here in the first Genghis Khan scenario, you are given the task to visit all the tribes on the map and complete a quest for each of them to make them join the Horde. This mission type gives the player a lot of freedom in what order they want to prioritise objectives, leading to a lot of different outcomes. This specific example is also a no-base mission, but not all of them are, as shown by several missions in Age of Empires 3, like A Pirate's Help and Respect, which both give you bases. Finally, there's low economy missions. Now these are similar to no economy missions, in that you can't create new workers and get a large economy going. But it is different in that you might have a few workers already, or some other way of gathering resources. You still need to pick your battles, like in no economy missions, but you also get to make decisions about what units or technologies you need to prioritise. An example might be Henry the Lion from Age of Empires 2, where at the start you have no villagers or town centre, but instead you have 2 allies who will tribute you resources as long as you protect them. Okay, let's stop and review all the symbols I've currently added. We've got new letters for gathering, tactical build and questing elements in a mission, and we have symbols for indicating multi-part missions or missions with multiple objectives. Now, I'm sure there are plenty other symbols that could be added in to represent other elements in a mission. I've also come up with a few broad rules for how to organise the symbols, though these probably won't cover every situation. Firstly, when you're trying to categorise a mission, take the main objective and add a letter to describe it. Then, if applicable, add in letters for how many objectives, what type, and if there's any time pressure associated with them. Thirdly, add in any qualifiers that might change how you play to the front. If there is a second objective, do the same for the second objective and connect it with a plus or a slash sign. If there is another section to the mission, do the same for the second section and connect it with an arrow. Let's compare some more campaigns. How about the original Age of Empires 2 Age of Kings campaigns against the newest Age of Empires 2 DLC, Battle for Greece? They're quite different. The original campaigns have no missions with an explicit time pressure, but about half of the Battle for Greece missions do. The Age of Kings campaigns were often quite simple, about half of them are just simple attack objective missions. Meanwhile, only one mission in Battle for Greece is a simple attack this mission, with no interesting additions. Battle for Greece has many more missions that have plenty of objectives and side objectives, and indeed it also has many mission designs that I don't think I've seen anywhere else, which I was really pleased to see. The 25 years between these campaigns really shows just how campaign design for Age of Empires has changed. Let's now look at a single mission type and compare some examples. For example, AXMT missions, where you're attacking a number of moving targets under a time pressure. Often this looks like a "this thing is escaping, destroy it" mission. Examples are the Great Train Robbery from Wings of Liberty, Shoot the Messenger from Heart of the Swarm, Bring Down the Mountain from Age of Empires 3, and Eye for an Eye from StarCraft. Now, personally, I love 3 of these missions, but I'm not a huge fan of Eye for an Eye, and its differences might explain why. All of the other missions give you vision of the objective so you can track it, but in Eye for an Eye, this doesn't happen, leading to a lot of uncertainty about when the enemy will try to escape. Also, all 3 other missions have escape lanes that run from one side of the map to the other, allowing a single army to cover all 3 lanes, especially if it's a very mobile army. Eye for an Eye, by contrast, has exits that are as far from each other as possible, meaning you need instead 3 forces to camp the escape lanes. Lastly, for Eye for an Eye, just camping the escape routes is not enough. You need to actually destroy the Protoss base to win the mission, meaning you need a fourth force to do that, potentially. It can get a bit complicated, and StarCraft's issues with group control and unit pathfinding don't help the issue. For our last example, let's look at the variety within a mission type, like ADXS. Here, you're fighting your way to an objective and then defending it for a time. This might be quite a short time, as in Welcome to the Jungle, which we looked at earlier, where you're just defending a spot for a few moments against a small force. Stepping up to defending against a larger force might be Media Blitz, where you defend 3 locations against a concerted attack to retake them, requiring a lot more firepower to defend against. Planetfall from Heart of the Swarm is another example, but here you need to defend a location for the length of the mission rather than just a short time, pushing you towards a more mobile force or good scouting to defend a much wider area against occasional attacks. At the end of the spectrum, there's Countdown from Brood War, where the whole length of the mission is about securing the Zeldnaga temple at the centre and defending it for 15 minutes against the best the Zerg can throw your way. Okay, that's almost all I wanted to cover. I just want to finish off by addressing some limitations to the system. Firstly, yes, the system is quite subjective. There won't always be one correct answer for how to label a mission. For example, if you have 3 objectives, all in the same place, does that count as 3 objectives or just 1? If they're units that could move but they just stand still, are they mobile or static? Generally, I'd say ask what other missions your mission feels most like, and it's probably a similar categorisation. Secondly, there are mission elements that certainly affect how you play a mission, but that aren't yet included in this system. Are they important elements for mission, or just gimmick mechanics? Take Supernova from Wings of Liberty, where a wave of fire means that you have to continually move your base across the map. Or perhaps missions where you have 2 divided bases, like Bad News in Age of Mythology. Anyway, that's pretty much it. I'd welcome some thoughts on how you change or improve this framework. Let me know what you think in the comments.